Hello, Dr. Grafals again. This week is our final regular week for our online course. We finished our last novel, David Chariandy's Soucouyant. Next week, our final week, the schedule will be different than the weeks that came before. You'll notice that the due dates for the online discussion posts next week are in the beginning of the week. That's because you're only reading an essay by the Puerto Rican writer José Luis González, The Four-Storied Country, and listening to a few songs by the salsa genius, Tite Cure Alonso. On Friday next week, you'll upload your final research paper on Canvas. And on Saturday, you upload your responses to the final exam prompts. Next Thursday, you'll receive these final exam prompts. The last housekeeping announcement to make is that the instructions and rubric for the final research paper is now on Canvas. A reminder that you're writing about two of the texts in our course. One of these could be a film. Although you can't focus specifically on Césaire's notebook of Return to a Native Land, Césaire and his poem can definitely be mentioned and engaged with in your essay, since it is foundational when thinking about Caribbean literature's emphasis on diaspora, cultural memory, and cultural geography. Our novel this week, David Chariandy's Soucouyant, is a relatively recent novel published in 2007. But it's a novel that has already generated much scholarly attention. Chariandy has also done brilliant interviews that articulates his own theoretical understanding of his novel. I have links to these two interviews on Canvas, and I suggest you read them over. One of these could be a secondary source you can use for the essay that you write. The novel concerns an unnamed Canadian protagonist whose parents are from Trinidad. Adele, our protagonist's mother, suffers from early onset dementia, and Roger, the father, ends up dying in a work-related accident. They live in Toronto, near the Scarborough Bluffs, overlooking Lake Ontario. The novel suggests that Adele's dementia is related to traumatic events that happened when she was a child growing up in Trinidad during World War II. As readers, we will only begin to understand the facts of this trauma in the novel's conclusion. Chariandy's novel is one that gains in significance when we reach the conclusion. Our protagonist, as a second-generation Caribbean Canadian, will have to make sense of the generational trauma that will be transmitted to him through his mother. One of the clues for understanding this trauma will be the legend of the Soucouyant, a female vampire in Caribbean folklore that haunts Adele. One of the ways the protagonist will make sense of his life in relation to his mother is through the study of history. An important minor character in the novel is the librarian Miss Cameron, who will introduce the protagonist to the study of history. On page 137, Miss Cameron states, quote, "Your history is a living book. Your history is your blood and flesh. Your history is your grammar for life." The protagonist responds, quote, "My history is a travel guidebook. My history is a creature nobody really believes in. My history is a foreign word," end of quote. But history is not the final word on the past. The novel also emphasizes the importance of cultural memory, which refers to subjective, often embodied ways of engaging with the past. You'll uncover many references, for instance, to birthmarks and bones that hold an enigmatic connection to the past. If the legend of the Soucouyant becomes a means for Adele of processing the past, the representation of the past that our protagonist must attempt to construct for himself must go beyond the official discourses of history. The past that the protagonist must give form to must negotiate, on the one hand, history, often written from the perspective of colonial discourse, and traces of memory on the other hand. One way to thematize a novel, then, is to consider how much the novel is about ways of representing the past. Specifically, it's about representing a diasporic past, a past predicated on displacement and the fragile bonds constructed between different spaces. It is a novel also about Caribbean migrants seeking to find a sense of belonging in a place like Canada. But the sense of belonging that the protagonist desires is not one of full assimilation into Canadian nationhood. Rather, the protagonist seeks a complex, hybrid conceptualization of belonging that reconciles both Canadian and Trinidadian spaces. This complex imagined geography will remind us of the ones developed by Césaire in Notebook of Return to a Native Land, or Paul Marshall's Black diasporic geography in Praise Song for the Widow. In the prompts for the discussion forum, I mentioned important quotes from interviews from Chariandy, and I suggest you think these through as you read the text. And this week, you're also watching one of the great films of the 1970s, Horace Ove's Pressure. It's known to be the first British feature film by a black director. One of the reasons you're watching Pressure is that it engages with a young black second-generation British teen of Trinidadian descent. Like the protagonist of Soucouyant, Tony also has to negotiate his Caribbean identity in spaces that devalue black lives, spaces that seek to efface the histories of people of Caribbean descent. So that's all for now. There's much more to discuss, but hopefully we'll do that in the discussion. Thank you very much.